Hey guys, now I have you here, I want to turn around to stuff a little bit because like you are always sitting here like receiving guests, and now I'm sitting here as a sort of co-host slash guest kind of deal. But I feel like the podcast general is always like you guys sit there, you're the host, like, hey, I'm Phil and Rohan, and we're the host and such. I want to flip around this bit a little bit because I feel like you guys are always doing the same. So like including here, I've been talking a lot about me and whatever I experienced about the Home Assistant release and whatnot, but nobody ever hears about you. And I'm going to flip it around. Sorry for doing that right here on the spot.
All right.
Right? Is that okay for you?
Come on. All right. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it.
So, okay. Now, welcome to the Home Assistant podcast. I'm your host for today. I'm Frenck. I'm going to really flip it around. And today with me are two guests, Phil and Rohan. Welcome.
Hello. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's weird not saying welcome. It's thank you for having us today.
Yeah, right? No, but for real, for me, it's really fascinating because you have like the release podcast, and then you do in between the guests that you have over, and you're asking questions, and sometimes you refer back to your own smart homes like a little bit, but you never really got to talk about it. But before I do, I really want to know, like a lot of people listening, they have maybe no idea, but how did you guys ever how did you get to the Home Assistant podcast at all? How did this thing came out to be?
It was all in the Home Assistant community. I think I responded to a forum post by the original creator of the Home Assistant podcast, Dan. He said, I want to create a podcast. I've created some podcasts before. I want to create a Home Assistant podcast. But I don't want to talk about Home Assistant just by myself. I want some co-hosts. Is anyone there to do it? And I responded on the forum. And Rohan, you must have also responded on the forum. And then I think there was 3 of us. And there we go. And then one day Dan said, my life is getting too busy. I need to quit the podcast. And I was like, well, I've never done a podcast before. Rohan, have you ever done a podcast before? Like Dan was the man, right? He was editing it. He was doing it all. And I think Rohan and I Rohan, you just talked back to me and you said, fuck it, let's do it. Let's give it a go, right? And here we are 5 years later, 6 years, I think it is. Still going.
Yeah.
I remember Dan. Yeah. That's true. I forgot about that. That's a long time ago.
Quite a while ago. I think I had first moved into this house, and then it was just shortly after that, maybe 6 months, 8 months after that. And so it was probably I want to say it was 2015 or early 2016. I should probably know how many episodes in we are, or how many. I think we're about 107.
Do you remember your first episode?
I do. It was 4 a.m. my time.
That's
Dan
right,
was in
because
New Zealand. I was in Australia, so they're a lot closer than me. And I think it's hard finding times, and we still struggle with this, right? And there's no perfect. I mean, today's a great example. I'm in North America. Frenck, you're in Europe. Phil's in Australia, right?
Best combo ever.
So it was. So for me, my very first episode was 4 a.m. I remember I set an alarm and. It's like, oh my God, this is so ungodly early right now. And to 2024, obviously Dan's not on the podcast anymore, but Phil still is in the Australia time zone, so I'm still waking up way earlier than I want to usually. But it's but one of us usually gets a short end of the stick, right? Which is like one of us is up super late. Usually it's like midnight Phil's time when we're recording. And obviously
it's just gone 1 a.m. for me now, right? So
there you go, perfectly. And today it was like 7 a.m. my time, right? Which isn't as bad. Sometimes it's 6 when we start recording, and which is why usually you'll see me sipping on my coffee, and then as the episode progresses, you'll see me more and more awake and more responsive and stuff like that. It's and sometimes when I usually forget to close my blinds, which I did today, thankfully, but. So it's usually you want consistent lighting when you're recording and all that stuff. But when I forget, you'll actually see like the sun come up and like my face changing, the sun's up and stuff like that. So it's
Cool. Hey, and what do you guys think, Phil? What has changed the most about the podcast over the years?
It's changed the most about the podcast. Okay, so we do video now, which I think we've done just over maybe 18 months. So we're on YouTube. There's a video version. And all of our guests, I think Rosemary was the first one.
You can see me waving right now if you watch on YouTube, just so you know, if you listen.
Rosemary was our first guest, and ever since then, to their credit, all of our guests have, said, yeah, come on, I'll come on audio and I'll be on video as well. So all of our episodes been audio and video. We've got a Patreon now, which thanks to our Patreons, we've been able to hire an editor.
Yes,
was cool. We've recently been able to do. So now we can, but hopefully in 2025, we're going to see a lot more episodes coming out, some more content, give people more of this show, right? I think I've got some ideas that I'm going to discuss with Rohan in 2025. If he likes it or not, he's going to have to get up a bit more earlier.
It's true, right? And again, a big shout out to all of our sponsors and our Patreons, because again, Phil and I, it has been a bit of a it takes time out of our day to not only do this, but so especially on Phil's side to edit it and stuff like that. And then, planning the we don't plan content. You guys actually do most of that stuff for us, Frenck. But
I'm not even doing that, right? And it's often the community as well, then again. So we're full circle back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's costs associated with it and stuff like that. And even beyond that, it's also a lot of our time and stuff like that, right? So because of that, we've been able to keep the podcast going, right? And Phil and I have chatted about it. God, I don't know how many times. It's what do we do? How do we keep because we both love doing this, right? Despite both of us having to either be awake super early or be up super late or whatever it is, we both still really, really like doing this.
What keeps you going then? You still really like doing it, but what keeps you going? What keeps you motivated in this podcast in general to do that every week? Every 2 weeks, basically, you put one out. But
it's our guests. It's a lot of people have some really cool stories, and we get to hear it, right? I know that sounds really cheesy or really obviously these questions aren't pre-planned, right? Frenck, you're just dynamically asking, but genuinely, it is. I love hearing what other people are doing, which is from the feedback we've received. That's what our listeners like as well, right? So it's I'm just a listener that gets the information ahead of time and just gets my 2 cents in, because I get to ask the questions as well, right? Of hey, well, how did you do this? Because obviously in a podcast, it is, I wouldn't say it's one way. It's mostly one way, right? Folks can still email us in and or comment on channel, whatever.
And they do, by the way, keep doing that.
Absolutely. That's how we can improve our content, but we also will connect you with whoever, let's say Frenck talks about his smart home, and we can say, okay, well, somebody says, oh, Frenck, you talked about, how you control these lights or whatever. How did you do that? Right. And we will normally VCC them in, and it's up to them to reply or not. But
we'll get back to your smart home pretty soon. Hold on. You think this is not prepared, but I do have prepared, because I want to go into the next thing and talk with you, Phil, a little bit. So if we talk about a community and giving back and what keeps you going, what is the one thing that you hope your listeners take away from the podcast each time they listen in?
I hope that they can think of just a new automation or something that seems mundane in their life, that they go, oh, actually, you know what? That would be great to automate. I always, some people always say to me, oh, I can't be bothered, doing this. That seems, why would you bother? All that time setting up this automation, you could just done it in 5 minutes. Well, I like to think of the blinds, right? How long would it take you every day to go around your house and open and close the blinds every day, right?
Are you listening, Rohan? This is a tip for you.
Right? Exactly. Well, Rohan's only just automated his blinds. He's only just automated them, probably for this reason, right? But that's still a couple of minutes a day, right? Times that by 365, times that by a year. I don't know. That's minutes that I've got to spend with my family, right? As opposed to having to go around closing all the blinds at the end of the day, I've been able to, spend a couple of minutes every day playing with the kids more, or doing whatever I love, right? And I know that seems silly, but that's when you add it up over the years, I think,
and it's just cool, right? It's cool to see happening, and it's kind of adding to comfort in a way. What I like about automating stuff is that once you do it in a way that it's there, you notice it's there, but it's not annoying, but it's just happening. But once you take it away, like something not working or turn off the instant you're annoyed that it's not working. I think that that's the
Exactly.
level of automation you need to go in general. This
Yeah.
is one of the things, right? You can indeed do.
And I always take away, but like just different ideas that people have got. Like the best one I had this year was just how one of our guests was using AI to prioritize, like chores around the house or maintenance items around the house, right? Like just taking that mental load off and, being like, yep, that's done.
That's smart, actually.
And I've spoken about it, I think, a couple of times this year, but I use a calendar planning system, AI planning system. I have that now integrated with Home Assistant and Google Tasks. So when a battery runs out in a sensor, right, like it adds a task to my task list that then that blocks out time in my calendar in the next few days, prioritizes it. And then I know, okay, I've got 15 minutes on Friday when the kids have gone to bed to go replace that battery so I don't forget about it, right? Like just taking the mental load off me. I think home automation like lends itself a lot to that.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Hey, Rohan, little quick. Can you tell me how did you end up starting using Home Assistant, and what does your smart home look like at all? Right. That's the general question you ask every guest once they come up. Like, hey, tell us about your smart home. This is your spot. I want to know how does your smart home look like? What does it look like?
It's honestly fairly basic. So I started out with
Hang on. Wait. We've got to preface. Okay. This is the guy that says my thing's pretty basic, but he's running like a full rack down in his basement with like some high tech gear.
That's because I also need that for my job, right? So it's multi-purpose, right? So, but I started on smart things, right? And I got different things in there. It's because at the time, especially, I was living alone in this house, and I just bought the house, and I was traveling a ton too. So I wanted to know, hey, did a water line break, or did somebody break into the house? Like, is my door open or something like that, right? So, whatever that looks like. So I just needed something to alert me and all that. And then the automation engine behind there at the time, it was based on Groovy, which I care less to learn. So I was like, okay, there is this random offshoot of JavaScript or whatever it is, right? And I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. I've avoided learning JavaScript my entire life. And then not that it's hard or anything, it's something I just didn't care to do. And then whatever, right? So I was like, yeah, let me look for something better. And this is very, very early days of Home Assistant. And I came across it and I said, okay, let me try it. And I threw it on a Raspberry Pi in like a virtual environment, right? And then, which I also, by the way, I hated managing that virtual environment. It was actually the worst thing I've done in my home journey. I hated it more than I wanted to learn Groovy. And then, yeah, I added all those devices into Home Assistant, right? I got a Zigbee. I was actually using my smart things for quite a while, for probably a couple of years, as essentially just a radio. Here's my Z-Wave and Zigbee, whatever, run it off of there. And then I just built my stuff off of that. Right. So it's mostly lights. Most of my automation is around lights and that kind of thing. And then door sensors, motion detectors, water leak. Again, my core use cases haven't changed. One of my tenets, and it's still kind of true to this day, is I'm not like, I obviously everybody likes the shiny things and be like, hey, look at what I can do kind of thing. But it has to be functional. There has to be a valid purpose for doing it. Would I do something just cause? Sure. But
it's part of the fun as well, right? Come on.
Yeah, you got to keep it entertaining to some extent. For the most part, it's pretty functional, right? So it's yeah.
But you started up with Zigbee mostly. What was the first device you added to your home? Do you remember? You're like, this is cool. This is smart home stuff.
Yeah. It's a question. What was the first thing that I did that was cool, or what was
the first smart device you added to your home? Do you remember what it was? And that triggered you? Maybe, I don't know.
It was a Smart Things door sensor, and I still use their door sensor. It's actually a Zigbee door sensor that's on my doors and stuff like that. And the original Smart Things motion sensor. It was just like fat, like little, not little. It was a big motion sensor for what it is. But that thing, that I still use it, and that thing lasts, like the battery on there. The battery costs like, I don't know, like $5 or $10 or something like that. It's not cheap, but it lasts like 2 years. Like it's pretty good, and it's in a high traffic area for me.
Still
So
good that those devices are around, by the way. Like that's the cool thing about local stuff, right? It lasts forever, basically.
100% until
Yeah.
until the device itself dies.
Yeah, exactly. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Hey, and Phil, what about yours? I feel like it must be high tech, right? You're a web dev from trade. Like this should be.
What are we doing? So, how about I give you the origin story? How would I give you that? We'll do it. All right. So, I started. What was the first device I ever added to my home? When I was living with my parents, I would have been 17, 16. I would have maybe 17, cut a job, get some money. I'm like, I had my own TV in the little spare living room we had. And they had these nice lights my parents had next to the TV. And I wouldn't it be cool? Like, it looks better when the lights are on. I don't like the overhead lights. I want those lights on. How do I get those lights to turn on when my TV turns on? And the first device I ever found was an X10
Same.
infrared receiver and an X10 smart switch. So I bought those, and when I had programmed it so that then I got a Harmony remote control, and as part of the activity, it would then send a signal to the X10 receiver to turn on the lights and the TV at the same time. So that was my first like light bulb moment. Like, wow, like I can turn on lights and the TV. Imagine if I could hook this up to a computer and run the whole house, right? Like, because then like I was looking at other gadgets, right? There's sensors, door sensors, window sensors. Wow, like I was like, yes, this is the path I want to go down. Fast forward, maybe a few years longer than I should have lived at home. But once I eventually moved out of home and got my own place, I was renting in Australia. Now, rental laws in Australia are a lot more strict in Europe. You only get 12-month leases, no guarantee that you get to stay more than 12 months. Electricity rules in Australia are a lot more strict. You can't go can't go replacing switches. Everything has to be above code. So I had a lot of Philips Hue bulbs in fittings. And that was probably, my first modern smart home device would be Philips Hue bulbs. I had the Zigbee hub from Philips Hue. I then wanted to be able to control them. I had a random Kickstarter that wasn't really ideal. It was Windows-based, and it just wasn't. And I was looking at Home Assistant on the side. I'm like, I should just go there, but I've put this money in. I sunk this money in the Kickstarter. It'll come good. Nah, stuff it. Let's go Home Assistant. And I'm like, stuff it. I'm going to blog about it. And then I had a Synology NAS lying around, and I was like, oh yeah, that's got Docker on it. I know Docker. Let's spin up Home Assistant on Docker. And at that time, it was a bit tricky to get Home Assistant on Synology working well. So I created a blog post, and then I think I got famous from that blog post. Right, everyone was my blog just went nuts from people watching that. And then I had some ideas for home automation. I created the not so binary presence detection for my blog, and that got smashed. Everyone's like, I know you. You're that guy that created that. Yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm now running Home Assistant on my dad's old i5 Lenovo desktop PC,
Nice.
which was running Windows. I've just stripped it, running Ubuntu as a server. It does the job. It's running Home Assistant, Z-Wave, JS, ZHAs through there. I didn't want to go out and buy a NUC or anything. I couldn't justify the money.
So
I wanted to reuse the hardware.
So you run the Docker stack, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Ron, how do you run it, actually?
Docker. Now it's a combination. So stuff like Z-Wave JS and some of the voice elements I've offloaded into my Docker stack. Home Assistant itself is running on a yellow.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Are you getting the CM5? Have you seen it? CM5 got released a few days back.
I saw it. I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know. My CM4 is working fine, right? Like at some point, maybe I will, where I say, okay, you know what? I want to consolidate all of my stuff because I don't have enough memory on my CM4, though at least the variant that I got, to add everything on everything that I want to say, hey, this is the one spot for everything home automation. So maybe I will. It's not a priority because what I have right now works and works great. I have some add-ons running in there and stuff like that. Wherever I can, I'll leave it on the yellow, but it's just a couple of the other
Some
pieces
things
like the
offloaded.
book and stuff like that, and ESP Home that I offload. Yeah.
Hey, Phil, you talked about a little bit about routines quickly, like being able to like do your shades routines and saves off a few minutes. It sounds like you're a little bit like into like optimizing your daily routine then. Is that a proper conclusion from that little thing? What would be
Yes.
your like biggest routine saver there, like your biggest daily minutes saver in your smart home setup?
That all went out the window when I got kids. When I had kids, the routines no longer exist. It's all on kid time now. But no, I do think what saves me the most time. I think it's just the lights, like just having all the lights automated, especially around the bedtime, like the nighttime and leaving routines, right? For the ability to go, okay, the house knows when everyone's in their bedroom, shut the house down, essentially.
Right.
And
That's a good
also
one.
with children, they also cost you more time, but also they like to leave things on. So
Yes.
I have, very young children that love to, get into the TV and they'll sit on the couch and watch TV, and then they're just done and they will walk off. And so having the ability for the TV to turn itself off when no one's watching it also saves my sanity too, not knowing that there's just a TV noise background running in the background for no one watching the TV, right? So those things certainly save my sanity. But I think the biggest thing I'm trying to get to now is energy and temperature control around the house, right? So, closing the blinds when it's hot outside, having a weather station outside so I can see, is it raining? Do I need to water the plants? Or do I need to close the sun on this, shades on this side of the house because the sun's on that side of the house, and all that. Like just trying to automate things to know it's done before I think about needing to do it, right?
No, makes sense. So with look out to future things, right? What are, for both of you, the future smart home technologies you're excited about integrating that in your current setup in your own homes?
Do you mean technology that exists today, or we want to exist in the future?
Both. Anyway, like anything that comes to mind. Like if it's something you really want and it doesn't exist yet, we can invent, right? But there are also things that are on the road. By the way, you guys are going, I've heard, to CES. So probably maybe this question is a little bit too early.
Yeah.
You should maybe reevaluate that after you win there in January. But yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. I know my priorities, kind of like what I want to focus on this year. We were joking about blinds, but what happened is in basically the backside of my house, we redid the living room and the kitchen, so it's just like paint and all that stuff, right? And as part of that, we ripped down the blinds and stuff. And I was like, okay, I want to get smart blinds. However, and I like the look of, personally, again, personal opinion, whatever. I like the look of Venetian blinds, right? Like the slats that kind of go in, a little fatter, whatever. In Canada, you can't find smart Venetian blinds, so they've actually banned corded blinds now, because I guess too many like people were getting strangled on them or something like that. There's a danger there. And so because of that, there's a lot of folks that do make smart Venetian blinds, like I think Motion Blinds has some and stuff like that.
Yep.
Aren't like sold in Canada, and I don't believe they're allowed in Canada even, right? So can I go sneak them in from somewhere? Probably, but I still want to keep things legal and keep things to code and whatever, right? And
it's a weird idea that you put something in as a window cover that could be potentially illegal. That sounds weird.
yeah, right. And and I didn't realize this was a thing until we went blind shopping, and I was like, I just want standard blinds, because I can just use standard blinds and automate those, right? I use the switch butt tilts in my office here. So I'm like, okay, I could still do that kind of thing, but I'm like, now I want better blinds. I have one use case for roller blinds, which are easier to find, right? And those are definitely easier. But the Venetian blinds, finding smart Venetian blinds, are really hard. So I would love to get that in. That's kind of my goal for, actually not even this year. It's honestly, it's probably like 2024, late 2024 goal. But
the time is getting short now. You have to hurry. That's definitely true, right?
that one I have a bit of pressure too, just because again, we're not in like I don't have a spacious backyard or anything like that, right? So people can look into our house. So it's there's definitely a privacy aspect there that I'm lacking right now. So I kind of want that. But other than that, probably just energy stuff for the future. That's been one that's kind of like, it's not critical, but I'd love to do it. And
good for the wallet and the environment, right? Both.
Absolutely, right. And I've had personally, I from a sustainability perspective, I really do like taking that approach, like environmentally friendly, whatever that looks like, and kind of like what Phil said, right? Like automate the blinds and all that stuff to start saving on like heating or cooling, whatever that looks like too, right? So yeah, that's my 2025 outlook. I hope if I can get to those things, that'll be good.
Good. Hey, circling back a little bit to the podcast, I have a few questions there left, and then we'll call it a day, and I'll let you guys go. But one of the things is, how has hosting this podcast, the two with all the guests and telling people, influenced your own smart homes? Maybe that's for Phil.
It has certainly given me faith that I'm not crazy. When people, tell me, when my family and friends are in my house and they're like, I feel as though I get judged, why do we have to go to Phil's house, right? Like why does Phil's house have to have automated lights, right? Like, why can't you just have a normal house? And I'm like, if only they knew like some of the crazy stuff our guests get up to, right? Like, so there's that. But I do think that Rohan and I are in a very privileged position in that we get to talk to all these people, and we wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for people, volunteering their time to come on and talk to us and wanting to share their stories, right? I think there are so many ways to skin a cat. That's particularly true in programming and in the smart home. And everyone's home is unique. There will never be, exactly the two homes. And it's always interesting to see how people have home assistant in their lives and helping their lives, and how we can, learn from that to help our own lives. So, yeah.
That's a very interesting thought, because from that perspective, Rohan, what would you say if somebody would start it out with a smart home? What advice would you give them? Like if you start out building up your smart home with all the information and learnings you've got from everybody and all the crazy stuff, but and the inspirational stuff as well, right? But what is the advice you would give to anyone starting out doing home assistant or a smart home in general?
Start out with a big bank balance.
Yes, that's number one. No, but keep it. But actually, kind of the opposite, right? You can grow into it, and keep it functional to start with, right? Like, so have a purpose. Don't just buy a bunch of stuff and be like, hey, look, I can turn on my lights with my phone, right? And don't get me wrong. There is a shiny thing kind of aspect to it, right? Where your friends come like, hey, look at what I can do. Which is, I'm not saying don't do that. Sure, if you want to, if that's what makes you happy, great, go ahead. But for me, it's if I'm investing the money into it, there has to be kind of a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
Because I find it hard to justify it to myself, let alone, to my partner and family, whatever, right? Just to say, hey, I spent X amount of dollars on this, and nothing smart is cheap, right? I think we all know that.
Yep.
Unless you DIY it, right? So,
and if it's cheap, it's probably because of a reason, right? So look for local and such, and pay that extra buck. To be honest, like it will create that sensors that last forever, as we talked about, right?
Exactly. But start with a purpose, right? For me, it was security, home security, and then even lighting automation, stuff like that I lumped in with home security, right? And that's whatever that looks like for you.
You want to add to that, Phil?
Yeah, go room by room. Don't try and do everything.
That's a good one.
I would say, start with maybe common area, living area, kitchen. Just choose one room. Get that working nice, because that way you can also use that as a testing ground. So, if you've got the wrong motion sensor, you haven't bought 6 of them to go around the whole house. You've just got one room that can have the wrong motion sensor. And then scale it up. Once you've proven it works, you've got the automations, you've done your learnings, then go out into the other rooms. not a common area. I think a lot of people would start. I know I use my office here as the beta test for the house. If you're the person that is designated to be the smart home person of the house, maybe a room that is yours that you can tinker in, and if the lights turn on at the wrong moment, it's only you that's going to get in trouble. That would be my advice.
What if you start like a wood panel? Like just get a piece of wood, mount all your stuff on there, like
make a little laboratory, right? And play with that. That's not bad, actually.
Yeah, try it. And then once you're good with that, then you take it and then, like, let's say it's a door sensor, right? You take these door sensors and then put it into put it on the door, right? And
yeah. I would say if you start doing, and I think this applies to anyone, regardless if you new to home automation or like using Home Assistant for 8 or 9 years already, do small steps at a time. Don't overthink things. I think one of the bigger problems we or most of the technologists have is that we think about like this light and all the different use cases we want and every little edge case we want to cover. And then we end up writing, at least I am always ending up writing automations that are so huge and complex that it never gets finished. So take a little step at a time. It's fine that it fails and like to tweak every single time and keep iterating on the process. Make small steps and don't try to do it all in one go. Just like do a little thing and make that light working and maybe add the second light later. And if you want to like react on a different sensor or different like lighting outside with a luminance light or something, like do that later. Just start and keep iterating, keep improving and keep doing that, because then you end up with the awesome smart home. And if you do a whole complex thing first, it will definitely not be good. It will be full of unexpected things. And it will take a long time to get there.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you'll hate it.
Right? Yes, like, you hate it. You will hate it. Yeah.
So,
hey, last one that I want to go out with is what is for both of you? What is the most memorable moment in the whole podcast or smart home journey you had over all those years?
I think if there's one that I always come back to, it's James and his crazy, almost currency for his children's like technology use. I think it was one step away from creating basically a cryptocurrency, or at least that was his thinking of, right? Like it automated it very nicely. I think it's a couple of years ago now that we had James on the podcast, but I always think of that as a father, getting older kids. I'm always like, oh yeah, I could see how James went down that path, right? Like it's not far off where I'll need to start, restricting your time on this device and having that automated, right?
And James did it before Habitica or whatever. So
yes, exactly.
Right.
I think for me it is that first episode that we talked about earlier, right? And it's like it was just, to me, it was just the coolest thing. And I was like, oh wow, this is and it just so happened, like one of the things I do is like at the beginning of every year, like not resolutions, but it's kind of like, hey, like what do I want to focus on for personal development, right? And for me, it was to get more comfortable with public speaking and that kind of stuff. So and for me, like again, I've spoken at a couple of events now, like things like Cisco Live and a lot of those kind of things, where it's large enough audiences, right? And or just getting out there and being able to put myself in front of people, that was it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, but it wasn't comfortable. Like it was somewhere in between there for me. And for me, it was like it just so happened to line up with actually when the podcast started and stuff. And for that year, that was kind of my goal. And yeah, so we ended up doing that. But it was definitely, the first episode was very memorable for me. And I think it was just like, oh, cool. Like there's other kind of like-minded people. And like, obviously, like I was on Facebook and Reddit and all that. So actually, I don't think the Facebook group was there yet, but I was on like the Reddit subreddit and whatever for it. And on the forums, which was the early forums, right? It was on Gitter, I think. No,
the chat was on Gitter, yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, and it was like, so it was all of that stuff, and but then when I started it, and I was like, so like I knew people existed, but it's like now I'm like, oh, I'm talking to Phil and Dan and stuff who are actually also doing it, right? And so to me, that was kind of cool. And then as the guests come on, it's like, okay, there's more stuff, and you remember little fragments of memorable stuff from those episodes, right? And again, for me, it's like it's hard to put like, oh, Frenck talked about this and in episode 30, right? And it's like I just, my memory doesn't work that way. But I'm like, somebody mentioned this, and I know Frenck was on the podcast, right? So it's like, again, like we've had some fun things, right? Like building an automated toilet, and like those kind of things, right?
I remember Pete from New Zealand, XBMC Nut. He created an automation for a reminder just to look at the sunset, and there would be I think he had a camera facing west, so that he could get a picture of the sunset, and it would be a reminder. Just as it was, as the sun was right angle, it's a little reminder would come up. Hey, have you looked at the sunset tonight? Right, like.
That's
Totally
cool.
doesn't do anything, but it was just a nice way to, don't like to be in the moment, right? Like just little things say, hey, go and enjoy the sunset for a minute, right? So I thought that was one of my favorite use cases of Home Assistant too.
Yeah.
That's so cool. In the end, looking back at all of this, right, and the talk we had today as well, and the talks I gave at Gap Universe, and like my own history with Home Assistant, it always boils back to the community in general, and the things that everybody is doing in the community, whether it's contributing or reporting an issue, sharing, helping out others on the forums, right? Making YouTube videos, writing blogs, or what you guys do, making the podcast each every 2 weeks and each month on the release. Everybody is doing their parts and the things they like to do and tinker with in their own ways, and sharing indeed their experience and not feeling alone basically on doing this. And it's just awesome. So thank you so much for you guys, by the way, doing this, and keep doing this, and thank you for sharing the story, and thank you for having me on today. Thank you for being on the show today then as well, considering how this last bit is going. And with that, like I'm going to say goodbye, and everybody, thank you for tuning in. The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Thorne and Rohan Karamandy, and just for today, myself, Frenck. And if you want to share your home automation journey, come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASSpodcast.io. And for links to topics we discussed today, check out our show notes on the website.
Wow, you memorized it all. Well done. He's done it.
I love it.
He's done it. Thanks, mate.
Oh, man. Perfect. Thank you so much.
That was fun.